Hello, my friends, Evolutionary Energy Arts family. Third take, guys. Hopefully, this one's going to hold. A lot of technical issues lately, and I'm hearing from a lot of friends that they're having issues with technology, phones and things not working right. Are you guys experiencing anything like that as well? Wonder what's going on. So, what we have going on over here is we have Iran's special marine unit sabotaged tankers. In case you guys haven't seen this yet, this is out of Debka, and Debka started to report about this last night. And basically, they're saying that the Revolutionary Guard, which the U.S. has deemed a terrorist organization, actually did commit sabotage here and sabotaged 4 tankers. And they're saying this was done basically to send a message that they don't have to shut down the Straits of Hormuz in order to cause issues. And as we know, the U.S. has had basically, they've had sanctions on Iran, and the rhetoric is going through the roof right now. Tensions are super, super high. As we see here, there are two reasons why they wanted to do this. And to show the U.S. and Gulf oil nations that Tehran doesn't need to block the Straits of Hormuz in order to disrupt the Gulf oil's exports to international markets. And the UAE has built a new Habshan Fahira oil pipeline there for the purpose of circumventing the Straits of Hormuz. By striking Fujairah, the Iranians demonstrated that alternate shipping routes are just as vulnerable to Iranian attack as the Gulf of Hormuz. Now, they did this also in a limited fashion because they didn't want to escalate and basically take lives, which could lead to a serious reprisal. Of course, many believe that it's just a matter of time before this war gets hot. And over here, as you see, for the Iranians, the war has already begun because what's going on is a level of pressure never seen before. And as we know, we've talked about PNAC, we've talked about General Wesley Clark, 7 nations are going to be hit. And there's only 2 that haven't really been conquered yet, and that's Syria and Iran. And right now, the forces are over there, and the forces are basically arrayed, and it could happen at any time. The New Yorker is Trump yet another U.S. president provoking a war? Yeah, it's time for people to really recognize that it doesn't matter whether it's a Clinton, a Bush, an Obama, a Trump. The war machine goes on. It just goes on. Listen to what President Kennedy and Eisenhower said. The war machine goes on. That's part of the bigger plan here. So many people believed, in Q, and so many still do, and also that President Trump is a white hat and that he's driving on a white horse. But if you really look at it, it's getting pretty obvious, and it's been pretty obvious for many people to see through all that. That, this is still the same old stuff going on. It's the same old plan that's been there for over 20 years. And, going back to 1997, when the article came out from a Project for a New American Century, talking about the need to control the resources to guarantee the dominance of the U.S., which is, as William Cooper said, the military arm and the policing arm of the powers that be. These people are nothing but puppets. They're nothing but puppets, Time to wake up, smell the coffee, and get off the divisive actions that they use on us, and some of us are more liberal, some of us are more conservative. Any way you look at it, the program here, the agenda keeps moving forward. Doesn't matter if there's a liberal or conservative in there. They're only liberal and conservative in name only. That's not even accurate. As we see basically just constantly the deficit going up, the spending increasing, it doesn't matter which party's in there. Republicans were supposed to be the conservative party, fiscally conservative. This is the biggest deficit ever. This is the biggest budget ever. So we could throw that out the window and wake up, and don't fall for it. Too many people blindly follow. They just blindly follow. They can't think for themselves. And we need to think and to use our intuition and get connected with each other to wake up out of what is going on around us. And the war machine is in full swing. And over here, and this is out of Fox News, chilling World War III war games show US forces crushed by Russia and China. And we've been talking about this because, this is not going to be the same old thing. It's not going to be Afghanistan. It's not going to be Libya. It's not going to be Sudan or Somalia, and it's not going to be Iraq or even what we saw in Syria. And Syria is just basically on pause right now. That's going to get hot at the same time. That's pretty obvious with the forces that we see there. So we see scary World War III war games show US forces crushed by Russia and China in certain hotspots around the globe. How could this be with this budget that is, more than twice the size of Russia and China's combined, and has been that way for decades? It's really actually increased dramatically in the last several years. So research organization RAND has run dozens of war games simulating major conflict scenarios in what describes as Russia and China's backyards. The war game suggests that US forces in those locations will get attacked by a vast array of both conventional and cyber weapons. RAND senior defense analyst David Achenmanek discussed the simulations at the Center for New American Security in Washington, D.C. last week. In our games, when we fight China or Russia, blue gets its ass handed to it. Not to put too fine a point on it, he said during a panel discussion. Blue denotes U.S. forces in the simulations. We lost a lot of people, we lost a lot of equipment. We usually fail to achieve our objectives of preventing aggression by our adversary, he said. Based on the war games, a clash with Russia and the Baltic states would result in rapid defeat of U.S. forces and their allies. Within 48 to 72 hours, Russian forces are able to reach the capital of a Baltic state. On the other side of the world, Chinese invasion of Taiwan, while massive military gamble for China, would also pose a huge challenge for U.S. forces in the area. Russia and China have amassed large inventories of precision-guided cruise missiles and ballistic missiles that can reach hundreds of miles and strike military targets, he said. Against this backdrop, U.S. military outposts and aircraft carriers in the contested regions could face a potential devastating barrage of missiles. In RAND's war games and analysis, Russia, and particularly China, unleash so many missiles that they can overcome the U.S. defenses. They send salvos that are so great we cannot intercept all the missiles. And the researcher notes that the key domains of warfare are contested from the start of hostilities. The U.S., he explained, should not assume air and maritime superiority over battle space. American space assets could face attacks, while U.S. command and control systems could be targeted by electromagnetic and cyber weapons. To combat these threats, the U.S. forces could ramp up their deployment of so-called standoff missiles that can be fired from large distances, such as cruise missiles, along with highly robust reconnaissance systems and jam-resistant communications. So, if it doesn't go nuclear, it would not go well, according to this study. And everybody assumes it would automatically go nuclear, but would it? Or would it be a limited thing? We've talked about this site before, and I don't even want to say its name. And this site really does pay attention to all the military moves going on and all the purchases and how things are being built up. And when you click over here on countries, they give forecasts, as we've talked about. I have talked about many, many times. Others have talked about it as well. And if you see here, it gives you population. 2017, US, 327 million. Forecast for 2025, population, 100 million. 2017, 327, 2025, 100 million. So I brought that up before. If you check all the NATO countries, you see that same trend. If you check all the countries that are allies of the US, you see that same trend. And the numbers, are interesting to look at. And when you look at the opposite side of the coin, you see the numbers stay the same. 2017, China, 1.4 billion. 2025, China, 1.4 billion. It's the same for Russia and several other of those allied countries. So it's something to think about. Where are they getting this from? And we've talked about that before, and I've talked about it at length. And there are people that think that it's earth change related, people that think it's immigration related. The answer is pretty obvious in my mind. So the US-Iran naval war of 2019, what it could look like. And again, the thought is automatically they would want to shut down the Strait of Hormuz to shut off the oil. But as we've seen, it may not be the case. And when you look at the actual, forces as well, it is overwhelming what the U.S. has in opposition to that. But is this going to be the straw that breaks the camel's back and pulls Russia, China, Turkey, uh, and others into this as well? U.S. ready to go for Iran's guards bases if Iraqi Shiite proxies attack Al-Tanf garrison. And Syria is actually increasing, and the proxies are fighting in Syria. There's been a lot of things going on there. It's also an area that probably will go hot at the same time, as we were saying. And meanwhile, we have American B-52s flying a first mission over the Persian Gulf to send a message to Iran. And yeah, we know this. This is obvious. The amount of forces that are there is rapidly becoming something we've never seen before. And this is out of the US NI News Fleet and Marine Tracker, as we see two groups in striking distance of both Syria and Iran. And there was actually a third one that was listed, but there's more reinforcements coming, as we have seen, with the USS Arlington and Patriot missiles to join the Lincoln Carrier strike group in the Middle East. And when you look at the numbers, this is global firepower. The U.S. obviously #1 in the world in military strength, and Iran is listed at 14. As far as your actual military personnel, most definitely U.S. has a huge advantage technologically as well. And you see the defense budget, $716 billion to $6 billion, not even close. And one of the things that you can see here, obviously, again, air dominance, but is it going to just be a one-on-one show? And, with everything that's built up, it's not a matter of if, it's really more of a when. And plus, we know the plan. So you can see the dominance here, which is clear. Yet, it won't probably be just a one-on-one show, and that's probably the bottom line, because we also have Venezuela over here, which ranks 43rd out of 137 nations, and when you look at them, they don't have anywhere near the firepower Iran does. So obviously, it would not be necessarily something that would be a fair battle, so to speak. But then yet, we have seen, like with Afghanistan and with other countries, it's one thing to start a war, it's another thing to actually finish it. And here we have Britain warning US-Iranian conflict could break out by accident. That is most definitely a big possibility. And automatically it makes me think of all the false flags we've seen, from the sinking of the Lusitania to just, you name it, there's been so many. And if you guys haven't checked it out, check out the series on Gaia with Richard Dolan's False Flags. That's definitely well worth the watch. And I know Gaia has their own issues as well. So it's time to rise up. A Venezuelan general tells the military officers in a video, that is not over by a long shot. Chinese newspapers are taking a hard line on President Trump. And, with all the new trade tariffs going into effect, it's making the Dow plunge, as we see the Dow down more than 720 points. And it's also, shaking the markets globally. And markets tumble as China unveils retaliatory tariffs, may dump some treasuries, yes. And divesting yourself of your enemies, quote unquote, treasuries would definitely be something that would happen before a full-scale conflict would come. Pompeo skips Moscow trip to pressure EU officials in Brussels on Iran, as obviously Iran and Venezuela are the only things on Pompeo and Bolton and the Trump administration's mind. They feel it's time to finish off what was started so long ago. Meanwhile, you have Turkey's largest military exercise kicking off. Turkey is a huge wild card in all this. They're on the Chinese-Russian side right now, but Erdogan, he has his own thing going, and he sees himself, heading a revised Ottoman Empire that's going to unite all the Arab nations, all the Islamic nations of the world. And so, many are thinking about the Nostradamus, Mavis prophecies as well, as we wonder, exactly how is all this fitting together. We could definitely see how the battle lines are being drawn up. Federal spending sets record through April. So much for conservative fiscal behavior, right? It doesn't matter. Again, doesn't matter if it's Trump, doesn't matter if it's Obama, doesn't matter if it's Bush, doesn't matter if it's Clinton. They all know how to spend, and particularly well when it comes to the military-industrial side of things, as that has gone through the roof. And you're never going to balance this budget. You're never getting rid of this deficit. But this is part of the bigger plan. This is. And meanwhile, gold is surging. And at, times like this, gold and silver are definitely something that could be worth the investment if you are able to. And, some might rightly think, hey, you might even be better off with just stocking food, seeds, things like that. And so we've seen so many people that have had these visions, and we talked about several of them. And here's Henry Groover, and he's another one, yet another one. There's been actually thousands of people. I would venture there's tens of thousands or maybe even hundreds of thousands of people when you get down to it that have seen basically a Russian Chinese invasion of the US, and he is yet another one. And again, this is all set to start in many people's minds in the very, very near future. And it's just interesting to see, because now when we look at it, you can see how it could go down. You really, really can. So if we have the power to stop timelines, if we have the power to jump timelines, now is the time to do it. So we need all of our prayers, all of our focus, all of our positive attention and intention focused on stopping this catastrophic war that they seem so determined to get going. And as we talked about before, and I was watching Ben from Suspicious Observers, he's usually the way I start my morning. I enjoy him. He was talking about cosmic rays, that we're at cosmic ray maximum, and he said it's not a good thing. Now, there, in a scientific point of view, I could agree, but I also think there's something so much bigger than that happening. I think it's a change in consciousness, and I think that these cosmic rays, in my mind, they come from God, source, prime creator, however you want to word it, and they're part of our evolution in consciousness and are raising up in consciousness. And we have seen CIA studies that show that when you're barraged by cosmic rays at ever increasing levels, one thing it does is actually, well, for one, it triggers our DNA. For two, it makes us more intuitive and psychic. So we're going to be able to see through all the BS, which we can see through. And you guys know, you guys could see straight through it because you're not just watching the mainstream media. And you're not just buying what they are selling, because they are most definitely selling. That's what's going on here. But you know what? We're awake, and we can see through this. And we see all this. And again, like I said, are all these visions given to us? Are they given to us? Are they given to us by who? Or are we tapping into our collective consciousness? Are we seeing just one possibility? What's going on here? Are these self-fulfilling prophecies? Are they designed to make us feel that there's no choice, no chance, it's just nothing but punishment and destruction? Well, we need to recognize that we are co-creators, that every one of us is perhaps living in their own reality. So what timeline do you want to be on? Do you want to see these things happen? It's so critical right now that we lift ourselves up in mind, body, and spirit, and also use our voices in any way possible. We could take refuge in some of the things that we see happening around the world. We've seen peaceful protest work. We've seen Gandhi do amazing things in his country peacefully. It can work. We have to basically let people know what's going on, make people aware of the manipulation, so enough people will say, hey, we're not buying it. Don't go starting another war, or we're going to kick your butt out of office. If we can get enough people together, that's what we need to do. We need to wake people up. We must wake them up to what's going on. Don't think this is going to be just one more of those wars that are happening over there, because this is going to come to home. This is going to roost in the US, and this is going to roost in all the NATO countries as well. And it's law of cause and effect, law of karma, whatever you want to view it, God's judgment, it's up to you, and we each make our choice at how we view things. Just recognize during the big world wars, for one, there is drafts and military service. They're going to be trying to pull people in. And we're going to have a draft so quickly, it'll make your head spin. And that's just part of it. There'll be rationing. There were victory gardens and victory jobs. They had the ladies doing their part, and they sell it like it's patriotic and all. But recognize that these wars are about profit and misery. There are beings that feed off of negative energies, and you could call them demons, you could call them Draco, whatever you want to call them. Doesn't matter. There are negative entities out there that feed off of misery and warfare and conflict and energy. And energy is food. Ultimately, everything that you eat is just one form of energy. So whether you're eating an apple, pasta, or a nice lentil curry like I am actually cooking right now, that's all just basically a form of energy. It's again in a different form. Now, there are beings that can draw energy straight in and use it for their own food source. And so these interdimensional, extraterrestrial, however you want to view them, demons, in the Vedas, they're called the asuras. And interestingly enough, some asuras could actually be semi-positive, and some devas, which were viewed as the gods or the nicer beings, sometimes they could have their dark sides as well. So it's an interesting world that we live in, an interesting reality that we live in, or perhaps it's just a simulation after all, just part of the matrix. And when we look at Gnosticism, which was severely persecuted by what was to become the church, and Gnostic Christianity was a driving force in the world, and it was stamped out. So you got to wonder why and how. Why did they stamp it out so much? Is there some truth there that they don't want getting out? And then we have the official version, which is all over the world, and it hasn't changed the world yet, right? So there must be something missing here in this bigger picture. And perhaps it's that we are, all of us, to embody what Christ was, which is love and compassion. And one thing he said was, if you're going to live by the sword, you're going to die by the sword. He told you, somebody slaps you on the cheek, then turn the other one for him also. If somebody steals your cloak, give them your tunic too. He didn't say pick up your arms and go to war, because that leads to a nonstop cycle of death and destruction and negative karma. It's the law of cause and effect. And that's what is part of the bigger plan here, because there are beings that want to keep us in that cycle. And Buddha saw that, and he understood that this was just a matrix, and that we can't escape this prison if we don't allow ourselves to be pulled into those lower vibrations. And we recognize this matrix for what it is, and recognize the bigger picture going on here, and the Maya, the illusion that we're all under, this illusion of differences between the parties and all that, and the obvious plan of divide and conquer that has gone on, and that the human race has been in for countless millennia. It's time to rise above all that, and it's time to lift each other up, heart, mind, body, soul, pick each other up any way we can. First, we have to make people aware of what's going on, and then we must not allow ourselves to be pulled in, and not allow ourselves to kill each other, just plain and simple. So my friends, I look forward to your comments as always. Please do subscribe if you haven't. Click the bell, get all notifications, share with as many as possible, and thumbs up to support the channel. I thank you guys so much for your support on Ko-Fi and also on Patreon, because you make it happen. And we need to do a lot of work in the coming days ahead, my friends. God bless. Stay safe out there. Stay prepared and stay positive. Namaste.